Welcome to Joy Meets World. I'm your host, Joy Yugi, and on this podcast, I'm sharing my adventures traveling around the U.S., visiting national parks with my dog, Quincy. Today, I will be talking about my visit to Yosemite National Park. So I left Bakersfield and drove to a little town called Cathy's Valley in northeastern California, about an hour away from Yosemite National Park and 2 hours away from Kings Canyon National Park. So I drove to Cathy's Valley to visit both of those parks. And the drive to Cathy's Valley was about 171 miles. That's 3 hours driving time. It was an easy drive, basically just about 2 or 3 roads. It was beautiful weather, about 70 degrees, sunny, dry, and warm. Cathy's Valley is named for a pioneer in the area who came out and settled the area. A lot of the towns in eastern California in the mountains are named for pioneers that came out and settled, or they're gold rush towns. So they're named for early gold rushers who were there, who came and set up the towns. So a lot of history here that has to do with settling the West and the gold rush, which is really cool. The temperature difference between Cathy's Valley and Yosemite is about 20 to 30 degrees. So it was in the 70s in Cathy's Valley, and then as you went up towards Yosemite, the temperature gradually dropped to about 40 degrees. And I went in on an afternoon one day, so it's an afternoon temperature. Cathy's Valley, where I was staying on a ranch, which was it wasn't a true ranch, it was called that, but it was essentially just a little grouping of Airbnbs, and then they had the hosts owned some animals that they let wander around in a field. And I encourage you to go watch my reel. You'll know which one it is because it has all the farm animals on it. Absolutely loved staying in a place with all these farm animals. There were donkeys, there was a Shetland pony, there was an alpaca, there were sheep, there were goats, and there was a pig with a huge belly and a huge personality. Probably my favorite animal on the farm. But it was just really fun to be close to those animals and to see them every day. The donkeys were super friendly and ran up to me every time I walked over. The alpaca was interested at one point, but then kind of ignored me. Then the other animals really didn't care. The pig ran towards me a couple times, talking, in what I can only guess was talking to me, but very, very loudly, and it was very funny. I don't know if he thought he was expecting food or he was demanding food. That's my only guess. But it was funny, and I really enjoyed seeing him and the other animals. Yosemite, my trip there was amazing, and I would encourage you to go. I would start off by saying that. They don't allow dogs on the trails, which is pretty standard for the national parks, but they do allow dogs on the paved trails, and there were quite a few paved trails that were open and very crowded, actually, at this time of year. I think it was a nice day, and so people were out and about. A lot of the trails to the high country and the roads to the high country are closed because it is wintertime, and they just go ahead and close those roads because they don't want to clear them when there is snow and ice, and it's probably just not safe to travel there. Technically, you can still hike those roads if you want to, or snowshoe, or go up into the high country, at your own risk during the winter, but you just can't drive up to trailheads essentially during the winter. Yosemite became a national park in 1890. It was the third national park, and it's divided into 4 areas called the High Sierra, which is also known as the High Country, the Granite Cliffs, the Sequoia Grove, and then Yosemite Valley. So the High Sierras, or the High Country, was closed, so I didn't get to see that. I did see the Granite Cliffs, drove through the Sequoia Groves, and then stopped in Yosemite Valley. They think they're still not sure how Yosemite Valley was formed, and they're not sure how the domes of the Granite Cliffs were formed. Their best guesses are that the valley was formed by glaciers that came down and carved out the valley and then melted. And then they actually think the cliffs, the domes and the granite cliffs were formed. They think that originally they were underneath dirt, the earth essentially, and covered by earth, and that the earth over the years has eroded away to show the granite that was originally underneath the earth but is now above it. So that is their guess about how these granite cliffs came to be, which is super interesting. Yosemite is named for the local Native American tribe's word for grizzly bear, because there are grizzly bears in the area. So that's what Yosemite means. The cliffs are really amazing to see. So the well-known ones are Half Dome, Glacier Point, and El Capitan. Yosemite Falls is a waterfall that's really well known. It's actually 4 waterfalls in one, technically. It's one of the tallest waterfalls in the world. It's maybe not in the world, don't quote me on that, but I do know it's one of the tallest in the U.S., almost 2,500 feet. Really beautiful. It's in the area of the cliffs. And then Horsetail Falls is a part of, it comes over El Capitan, which is a large cliff face, really beautiful. And there's what they call a nose on the side of El Capitan that the Horsetail Falls is on, and it's basically this formation, the way the rock forms on that side, and it looks like a nose, essentially, the way the rock is formed. So little did I know, but I learned while I was at Yosemite or researching going to it, that at the time of year that I was specifically there at the end of February, this phenomenon happens that does not happen any other time of year. So I happened to be there at the perfect time. And what happens is only in February, when the sun sets, the sunlight catches Horsetail Falls, which is again on El Capitan, in just the right way that it looks like a lava flow. It's really cool. I encourage you to go look at the pictures online. It looks like lava. So I was there at the perfect time to see this. I was there at the end of February, so I stayed. Sunset's about 5:15, between 5:15 and 5:30. And so there were hundreds of people there to see Horsetail Falls light up. The park had closed down the road leading out of the park, which is where El Capitan is. They had closed down one of the lanes. So it was essentially a one-lane road, so that people could park in the various parking lots and then walk about, I think I walked a mile to get to Horsetail Falls. And there were just hundreds of people sitting in the woods alongside the road near Horsetail Falls waiting for this phenomenon to happen. So it was like this big group event. And I took Quincy with me. There were plenty of dogs on the road. It was it's a paved road, so he was allowed to go on there. So it was really fun to have him with me. The sunset was beautiful, and right at 5:15 it started setting and the side of the mountain lit up. I will say I was thrown off, and I kept looking at the side of the mountain as I was walking to the spot to view Horsetail Falls. And I was so confused because I did not see any waterfall. I did not see any water. But there were all these people sitting on the side of the road, like looking at El Capitan. So I knew like it was there. I just thought I was losing my mind that I didn't see water or waterfall. So I just sat there and waited for whatever was going to happen. And a kind lady came over and was petting Quincy and talking to me. And I just asked her, straight up, am I crazy? Is this where I'm supposed to be for the waterfall? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, am I crazy that I don't see water? And she said, no. California has not had rain in so long or snow that there's no water. Essentially, the waterfall has dried up, which I don't quite understand because Yosemite Falls was going pretty hard. So I guess maybe just this specific water source at Yosemite had dried up. So there's technically no waterfall. So I asked her what in the heck we were all waiting to see. And she said that there's, basically just a trickle off the waterfall and that it still lights up. She had been there the night before and it still looked like lava. So she showed me the picture and it did. So that reassured me. The sun started setting, it started to light up, and then smoke from a controlled burn came over El Capitan, drifted over El Capitan, blocked the sun, and blocked the entire effect. So I just got to see a nice sunset and a nice orange cliff and did not get to see the actual kind of lava flow phenomenon. So I would definitely go back to the park again in late February to see that. I think it's definitely worth it to try and see it again. Hopefully, when I go again or when you go, there will be water in the waterfall and there will not be a controlled burn going on. Because you need, you can't have the sun blocked in any way while it's going down if you want to get the whole effect. So that was a little bit disappointing. I also had an adventure walking back to my car. So obviously the sun had set, and it's time to walk back. It's dark out. There's no sun and it is cold because there's no sun. So the temperature quickly dropped. I had a lighter jacket on, not a full winter jacket on. It was cold. It was cold walking back. And I had parked very far down this one road and had not really noted where I parked. And of course, when it's, late and you're ready to go home and you're cold and also your phone is at 5%, you're just ready to get to your car. So I did have a minor panic attack walking back because I could see the last car on the road and I hadn't passed my car yet that I knew of, and I couldn't see my car. And I didn't have a charger on me. The only comfort was that, these hundreds of people were walking back with me, so I wasn't by myself. There would have been definitely somebody to ask for help. But also these people were ready to get home too. So they were getting in their cars and driving off pretty fast. They were not sticking around. But all that to say, finally found my little CRV. It has a tendency, it's smaller than it looks, especially when parked around different cars, and it tends to hide itself in parking lots and in parking situations behind other cars. It's not very tall, and it's actually not very wide. And so that's exactly what had happened. It was kind of hidden between the two cars it was parked between. So it was a huge, huge relief to get to it, plugged in my phone. My poor sister, Lauren, had texted me, and I didn't have any service, and my phone was dying, so I had to by the time I got back to Kathy's Valley, it was an hour drive, and it was, in Pacific time, so it's very, very late at night for her, so I didn't text her back, so gave her a little bit of a scare, which is understandable, not hearing back from somebody after hours and hours, but it was okay, and I was grateful for her to be worried about me a little bit. The other parts of Yosemite are the Sequoia Groves, or one of the other parts is the Sequoia Groves. And this was actually the Mariposa Grove, which is the Sequoia Groves, was actually set aside before by President Lincoln in a land grant in 1864. So before Yosemite even became a national park in 1890, President Lincoln recognized that this area needed to be preserved. And he also set aside Yosemite Valley in the same land grant. There was the effects of a forest fire were visible in the Sequoia Grove. So a lot of blackened trees, a lot of fallen logs that are blackened or stumps, and just like cleared out forest. So you could tell that a fire had been through, which is always sad. But sequoias actually need fires to reproduce. They just, the Forest Service and the national parks like to do controlled burns. So obviously they can limit how far the fire goes and the destruction that it causes. The Merced River is really beautiful too. I followed it the whole way from basically Kathy's Valley to Yosemite, and it runs through Yosemite. It was running. It was not too cold. It was bubbling. There's plenty of water, which again makes me curious why there was none at Horsetail Falls, because the Merced River was full, and it looked like there's some ice flow in it too. So I'm just not sure why the river was running and Yosemite Falls was full and Horsetail Falls wasn't. It's a mystery. The water in the Merced River had like this tinge of blue to it that it looked like somebody had put like blue food dye in it. It was almost unreal how the color of it. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was like Caribbean blue, but it was not just clear water. There was a blue tint to it. Some cool facts about Yosemite that I learned, some cool people, or just some people who are associated with the park, is of course John Muir, who was a naturalist and started the Sierra Club, co-started the Sierra Club, was one of the the biggest proponent for starting the National Park Service and reserving this space. He was a conservationist. He really fought for, conserving these spaces in America. Come to find out, he was a little bit of a racist too. Didn't know that, but he definitely loved Yosemite, Kings Canyon, all of these Eastern California forests and spaces. He was a big proponent of, and he spent a lot of time in Yosemite. In fact, there's a plaque set up by the side of the road as you're going into Yosemite after you enter the park, and it is so cool. It just basically says that is the spot where John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt sat down and officially talked about starting the National Park Service. Which, you're crying. I'm not crying. You're crying. Very, very sweet. Teddy Roosevelt, of course, spent a lot of time in the park. And then Ansel Adams, the famous photographer, also spent a lot of the time in the park and took a lot of photos, based a lot of her work on the park. Yosemite Sam from the Bugs Bunny cartoons. I I thought of him when I was at the park, but he really has, other than just they just thought it would be a cool name for him, he has no association with the park. He's more of, when I think of, Yosemite Sam, I think of like cowboy Old West, and that is not the vibe I get from Yosemite at all. Like that kind of desert Old West feel. It's very, very different in Yosemite. So I don't think the connotation is exact or parallel. Yosemite was the only park, has been the only national park who put in a bid to host a Winter Olympics. So they built all this stuff in the 30s to support this bid to host the Winter Olympics, and they did not get it. Lake Placid got it in 1932, and so they lost out in the bid, and I guess they never rebid again. But I thought that was really cool. One of my favorite things that I saw at Yosemite was walking back from seeing the sunset at Horsetail Falls. The other side of El Capitan is just, pretty much all sides of it, right? It's a granite cliff. So it's just this sheer face. And as I was walking back in the dark, I noticed just this blinking light. It looked like a firefly in the distance. And it was like on the cliff face of El Capitan. And I stopped at one point because I could not figure out what it was. And then I realized it's a climber. It is somebody climbing that cliff face. It just blew my mind. Like, that light was so tiny, and he was only halfway up the cliff face, or she. I don't know who it was. It just blew my mind. I just don't know if, like, are they doing one of those things where they camp on the side of a mountain? Were they going to climb that mountain all night and then camp at the top? When did they start? That is amazing. Good for that person. I would definitely go back in late February to see the Horsetail Falls and try that again. But I would go back in the summer too to hike the high country. I've heard from a lot of people that I talked to in that group waiting for Horsetail Falls that's really beautiful to hike. It was a bummer that, of course, again, couldn't take Quincy with me on hikes or outside. Love the paved trails, but of course that's always a bummer. It does get crowded in the summer. That's what I heard, like very, very, very crowded. And it was even like the parking lots were full when I was there in late February on a weekday afternoon. So that's just something to note when you go back. It's a popular park. It's a popular park in California and across the world. So that's just something to note. That's it for Yosemite National Park. If you have questions or comments, you can follow me on Instagram at JoyYugi. You can leave a comment on any of my posts or reels that have to do with the park. You can always watch any of these episodes on YouTube. Just find my name, follow me there. And then I would love it if you could rate this podcast and review it. Just tell me what you like, what you don't like, and then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get updates of when new episodes come out. Until next time, I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.